Parshas Shemos, Tavshin Ayin Daled. Want to welcome all the old members here, new members to the Shiur. We begin a new Chumash this week. The beginning of the Parsha says, V'ela Shemos B'nei Yisrael. These are the names of the B'nei Yisrael, Haboim Mitzrayim, that are coming to Mitzrayim. Eis Yaakov, Ish Uveisai Bo. Yaakov Avinu came, people of Yaakov Avinu's household came, they all came down to Mitzrayim. So we begin this week discussing the Parshias of Golus and Geula. And it's interesting to note that the Pasuk, at the beginning of the Pasuk, at the beginning of the Parsha, we use the name Yisrael. The Eila Shemois B'nei Yisrael. And in the same pasuk, we switch over back to the name of Yaakov. You ever notice that? And then, Eis Yaakov. Right away we switch in the first pasuk from Yisrael to Yaakov. So to begin with, the Nesivos Shalom asks, right here at the beginning of the Parsha, why is it, B'chlal, that Yaakov Avinu stayed with both names? We see that Yaakov Avinu was given the name Yisrael, and even after he was given the name Yisrael, we see that the Torah still switches back to Yaakov, and it alternates. At times we use the name Yisrael, and at other times we use the name Yaakov. We know by Avraham Avinu, once Avraham was named, got the name Avraham, so the Torah doesn't use Avram anymore. And we even know, Kol HaKoirei le'Avraham, Avram, anybody who calls Avraham Avinu by his former name of Avram is over ba'aseh, we say. So, by Avraham Avinu, that's it. The name Avram was gone. No more name Avram. But by Yaakov Avinu, interestingly enough, we find that he was given the name Yisrael, and we continue to use the name Yaakov also. And when Klal Yisrael went down to Mitzrayim, the Nesivos Shalom points out that the name Yaakov was used even more than Yisrael. We use the name Yaakov if before we were alternating, when it came to Mitzrayim, the name Yaakov was used even more. We see the Pasuk, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Yaakov Avinu to go down to Mitzrayim, the Pasuk says, Yaakov, Yaakov, Al Tira Me'erda Mitzrayim. Don't be, Yaakov Avinu, do not be afraid of going to Mitzrayim. And we see the pasuk uses the name Yaakov. Why? HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Yaakov Avinu, Ki legoy gadol asimcha sham. He was getting a promise. Don't be afraid to go down to Mitzrayim. The pasuk uses the name Yaakov. Again, beginning of last week's Parsha, Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim. Again, when we're discussing going down to Mitzrayim, we use the name Yaakov. And so too here, in our Parsha of Golus, it says, Vayehi kol nefesh yotzei yerech Yaakov. When they came down to Mitzrayim, again, we're using the name of Yaakov. So Nesivos Shalom begins the explanation into this by telling us that we have to notice that the Torah speaks so much at length about these inyanim, the inyanim of Golus Mitzrayim, Geulas Mitzrayim, a little further in the Torah, Bias Haaretz. A great portion of the Torah is devoted to this Golus Mitzrayim, Geulas Mitzrayim, and then Bias Haaretz. And we know that each word of the Torah teaches us so many things, every letter of the Torah, but certainly each word of the Torah teaches us so much, and it teaches us lessons about how to conduct our lives. So if we see over here that Golus Mitzrayim and the Inyanim of Mitzrayim take up so much of the Torah, it is teaching us, says the Nesivos Shalom, lessons not just for the Golus Mitzrayim, but it's teaching us lessons for all the Golios in history. Chazal tell us that from the beginning of time, there's a remez in the Torah, in the Pasuk, at the outset of Parshas Bereshis, right away the Torah starts off And there's a remez that alludes to the Dalit Golios, which we are now in the fourth one of those Golios. The Pasuk says, V'ha'aretz ha'yisa soihu v'voihu v'choshech al pnei sahoim. And we all know what these words mean, although probably when we were in Yeshiva and Cheder, we touched it in Yiddish, and we could probably still all rattle off all the words in Yiddish, and we still have no idea what it means. However, each one of these words has a very, very important meaning. The Nesivos Shalom says that Soihu is referring to Golus Bavel, without getting into exactly each meaning and what it teaches us. But Vavoyu is Golus Modai. Choshech, for obvious reasons, also represented Golus Yovan. And finally, Al Pnei Sahoim, the last part of the Pasuk, is our Golus Roimi. The Golus which we're in right now, Pnei Sahoim, which seems to have no end. Just as that Tahoim has no end, we don't know when this Golus will end. But one thing we do know, we know that Golus is the story of Klal Yisrael. Unfortunately, but Golus is the story of Klal Yisrael. And Golus Mitzrayim, which is written about in the Torah, Golus Mitzrayim teaches us the way for all the Golios. We actually know that all our neshamas were there at these events. We'd say the pasuk at the end of the Torah, Atem nitzavim hayoim kulchem, and we see from there that every one of our neshamos was there. We say also, we know Pesach, b'chol dor v'dor chayav adam liros es atzmai ki'ilu hu yatzah mitzrayim. And of course we know we are not at Mitzrayim now. But the lessons of Mitzrayim apply to our Golus, apply for throughout the entire history, and that is Golus Mitzrayim. Every one of us, every Yid, was part of Golus Mitzrayim and Geulas Mitzrayim. Like Bilam says in his bracha, we know Bilam, when he was speaking about Klal Yisrael, Bilam said, Kel moitzi'am Mitzrayim. If you think about that lashon, moitzi'am is a lashon of hoive. It was not that Mitzrayim was something that happened in the past, and it's something which was an event that happened in history, and that's it. It's something that's gone. No, Mitzrayim is happening. It's happening even today because Golus is the story of our lives, and we have to learn those lessons. It's still happening. So now we can understand, it's very understandable why the Torah devotes such a large section of the Torah to the inyan of Golus and Geulas Mitzrayim. Because it's not just referring to that door. It's not only talking about the door and the people who are in Mitzrayim and they left Mitzrayim. It's talking to us. It's lessons for us how to deal with Golus. So the Pasuk says, Ve'ele shemois b'nei Yisrael, and listen to this lashon, Ve'ele shemois b'nei Yisrael, haboim Mitzrayim. The haboim doesn't mean those that came down then. Haboim, they're coming down. They're still coming. It's something that goes through the entire history. Haboim, it's in the present. The lessons of Golus are for us too. It's a lashon of hoive. There's coming and it's still happening. The Nesivos Shalom says that Yaakov and Yisrael are two different ways that we have our avodas Hashem in Golus. Two different ways that we learn to deal with Golus, which includes our Golus. There are times, says in Nesivos Shalom, that we are represented by Yaakov, where we know at the beginning of the history of Yaakov, V'yodoi oichezes ba'akev Esav. That's where the name Yaakov comes from. And what does that represent? That represents us always fighting back the Rav Esav. V'yodoi oichezes ba'akev Esav. Esav is trying to go, and we are fighting Esav, the Rav Esav. And that fight started even before Yaakov and Esav were born. And that's the Midas Hayira. That's Yiras Hashem. Fighting Taivas, whatever Esav represents, we fight Esav. And that's one part of the way we have to deal with Golus, and it's the only way that we're going to get out of Golus, in fighting in that way. Yisrael, says the Nesivos Shalom, is a bit of a higher madrega. Yisrael is an avodah that comes through avodas haboirei. And that comes after we finish the battles of Yaakov, after we finish fighting our taivas and different things in Olam Hazeh. That's when we move on to Yisrael. We move on to Avodas Hashem. But in order to have the Geula, and this is an important lesson that we need to know right now, today, in order to have this Geula, we know that we're going to need both Midos. So the Pasuk switches right away in the first Pasuk that tells us about Golus. The Pasuk switches right there and goes, Ve'ele Shemois B'nei Yisrael. Yaakov after that. The Pasuk uses Yisrael and then Yaakov to tell us that the higher Madreg of Yisrael we're going to need also. But it will only come if we go back and we use the Midah of Yaakov, Midah Sayira, and we fight the tides and the influences of Golus and the Taivas that we find here in our Golus. The Nesivos Shalom adds a very beautiful, encouraging thought about this. The Pasuk says in Parshas Beshalach, by Kriyas Yamsuf, V'yodu Mitzrayim ki ani Hashem, that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to drown the Mitzrim in the Yamsuf, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to do Kriyas Yamsuf, the Pasuk says, V'yodu Mitzrayim ki ani Hashem. The Mitzrim will know. Frek the Nesivos Shalom. This is a reason to go through all the Nisim and to do all the miracles of Yitzias Mitzrayim and Kriyas Yamsuf. Why? For what reason? So the Mitzrim should know that I'm HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachal, He cares what the Mitzrim, all this was done, V'yadu Mitzrayim Kani Hashem. So Nesivos Shalom answers that Mitzrayim, we could teach Mitzrayim to mean something a bit different. Mitzrayim could mean the Yidden who are in a Bechinas Mitzrayim. The Yidden who are far away today from Torah mitzvahs. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu performs all these Nisim, because sometimes it takes turning on a real bright light. It takes really showing something very, very dramatic to get your attention. So V'yadu Mitzrayim ki ani Hashem, that even those Yidden who are far away from Torah mitzvahs, those people, we want to let them know that Kadosh Baruch Hu wants everyone back. And in order for Golus to end, in order for us to get through this Golus, that's the way it's going to have to be. That everybody is going to have to come back. And we need to realize this. That just like Golus is for everyone and every person, we're now in the last Golus, we're near the end of Golus. And just like Golus is for everybody and everyone is in Golus no matter where you live in the world, we have to understand that Geula is for everyone too. And in order to have the Geula, we're going to need everyone too. Everyone needs to do their part. Everyone needs to do their Yaakov. What is Yaakov, we said? Yaakov is fighting the Taivas. You know, sometimes people resign themselves and they feel, no, look what I've been all the years. If we're going to get out of this Golus, it's not going to come from me. Because I've done just so much and I've been so off the path of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu really wants. What does it have to do with me? Says in Nesivos Shalom, no. And we can learn from here that the same way Golus is for everybody, so is Geula. And we need you, and we need you, and we need every person to do their part and say, put the past behind you. Geula is looking forward. That is the lesson of Geula, that you have to look forward, and every person has to change, every person has to do his part, and every little corner needs to be addressed. Every person has their job. Let's hope that we're going to learn the lesson of Golus and Taka, that this long Golus will come to an end, because everybody here and everybody that's watching this year and everybody in Klal Yisrael is going to know that they have to do their part.